Welcome back again in week 2 physiology. In this session, we will discuss the neuronal function or the nerve function, in other words. So, in order to discuss the neuronal function, we have to recap what we've mentioned in week 1 anatomy. So, we've mentioned that nerves are classified into 3 different categories. We had the sensory neurons, we had the relay neurons, and we had the motor neurons. So let's start with the sensory neurons. The sensory neurons are mainly involved in getting signals from the body to the central nervous system. Just like a computer, we need to have a processor. So in this case, in our case, the processor is the central nervous system, the brain or the spinal cord. While the sensory receptor present in each organ of the body, different organs have different sensory receptors, transmit the signal from these organs to the central nervous system. That's why we have sensory neurons. For the relay neurons, it's mainly involved in connecting the sensory and the motor neurons in the central nervous system. So it's acting like a bridge between these signals. While the motor neuron, which is one of the most important neurons, it transmits the signal from the central nervous system back to the organs. So it's like sending an email and getting a reply. So the reply is the signal that is transmitted from the central nervous system telling the organ what to do in order to contract or secrete something like a hormone or something. All this is carried out by something called synapse. The synapse, as shown here in the picture, is controlling how the signal will be transmitted, how the signal will be processed. So in this picture of the synapse, we have two neurons, two major players. We have the presynaptic neuron and we have the postsynaptic neuron. So the presynaptic neuron will have the signal from the action potential that we've discussed in the previous session. So the action potential carry the depolarization event that I will need to convey to the other neuron, the postsynaptic neuron. But there is a problem. There is something called a synaptic cleft, an empty gap between these neurons. So how can I simply transfer the signal with an empty gap in between? So in order to do this, the synapse mechanisms run as follows. We have calcium in the presynaptic neuron that allows vesicles containing something called the neurotransmitter. It's a chemical that helps transport certain chemicals across the synaptic cleft. The calcium will allow these vesicles to fuse with the membrane of the presynaptic neuron, releasing the neurotransmitter, in this case, for example, acetylcholine. Acetylcholine will bind to receptors in the postsynaptic neuron across the synaptic cleft that will open a voltage-gated channel, a sodium voltage-gated channel to be specific, that allow the influx of sodium to the postsynaptic neuron. And from the previous session, we know that the influx of sodium causes a depolarization event. And in that case, we have successfully transmitted a depolarizing event from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron. And that's simply how simple signal is transmitted from the organs to the central nervous system or vice versa. So here the synapse is controlled by many different functions, such as myelinated axons and something that we will talk about later in this course. So I'd like to thank you for attending this session, and we'll continue by our talk about neurotransmitter next session. Thank you.